"Sorry, you can't enter without an invitation," the young man blocking the doorway said, his eyes flicking over the old man's frayed coat shoulders. The old man merely offered a gentle smile, nodded, and stepped back a few paces. But as he turned away, a cold whisper sounded behind him. An outdated geezer wanting to join a new tech event? A ripple of giggles followed, like knives twisting into his pride. None of those laughing knew that this man, Howard Lyman, had once flown over the skies of Southeast Asia on a mission never disclosed. And no one expected that, just 45 minutes later, the community center would quake with the roar of helicopter blades as a Navy squadron appeared in the clear sky, bringing with them truths kept secret for nearly half a century. What could make an otherwise silent man worthy of an entire squadron's protection? And what had occurred on that classified mission in 1975? Hit subscribe to Veteran Best Stories to explore the full, untold account. Howard Lyman was 84, yet every movement still carried the discipline of a lifetime in service. Though the wooden cane in his hand was now an inseparable part of his slow steps, his back remained straight, a habit born not just of the body, but of the legacy of years spent on the front lines. His face bore the marks of time, his thin hands etched with decades of creases, yet in his eyes lingered that same resolute spark, a gaze not easily dimmed. He had once been a U.S. Navy communications officer, a role less flashy than pilot or combat commander, yet the silent lifeline that kept information flowing, orders transmitted, and hundreds of lives safeguarded via radio waves. Howard had served at Pacific bases, contributing to countless missions, most never made public. He sat amid engine roars and starless nights, coordinating airlift relief, evacuations, and resupply under dire conditions. And then, like every warrior who finishes his duty, he quietly withdrew from the spotlight, retiring to a modest apartment hidden among the old neighborhood, just a few blocks from the city's cultural center. That day, the cultural center was hosting a large exhibition showcasing the latest advances in defense technology. News of the event spread like wildfire throughout the city. Large banners, electronic billboards ablaze with sponsor names, cutting-edge defense contractors displaying their logos. People arrived with eager eyes, hoping to glimpse advanced drones, strategic AI models, automated defense systems that, just years before, had been nothing but dreams. But Howard did not come out of curiosity for technology. He did not come to take photos with shiny gadgets. He came out of compassion and memory. For among the devices on display were a few prototypes once familiar to him. Old radio sets, signal coordination units, a few scale models of wartime communication systems. They were parts of him, tools he had once used while placing others' lives in his hands. And he wanted, just once more, to look upon them, not with pride, but simply to offer a silent thank you to a chapter of life no one spoke of anymore. He wore his old wool coat, the rough, thick fabric that had accompanied him through harsh winters. On its lapel, he pinned a small unit badge, the faded symbol of the communications detachment he had served in. It did not shimmer. It was a circular pin etched with a faint radio wave insignia, recognized by almost no one. But to him, it was not mere decoration. It was a vivid memory he chose to carry as he entered that place. And then he was stopped. The young man guarding the entrance wore a crisp event management uniform, a Bluetooth earpiece, and a glowing name tag. When he saw Howard, he noticed nothing beyond an old man standing out among the youthful crowd. He extended his arm to block him, polite but firm. "I'm sorry, sir, but this event is for registered guests only. Without an invitation badge, I can't let you in." Howard stood still. He had not brought an invitation, because he believed he didn't need one. After all, it was a public space, and he had once helped create many of the things now on display inside. But he did not argue. He simply nodded, thanked the young man, and stepped back, then found a nearby bench and sat. His shadow stretched long on the sidewalk, swallowed by the bustling flow of people in and out of the glass-fronted building. Sitting there, Howard gazed at the new structure, a steel and glass edifice gleaming in the morning sun. He remembered when this place was merely an empty warehouse, converted into a training center. Back then, he had carried wooden planks, hammered in support beams, and installed signal transmitters. His sweat had stained each concrete step. Yet here it stood now, in a modern city, amid relentless progress, and it seemed none remembered the old sailor who once stood at its edge. His eyes revealed no hurt nor any anger, only a profound calm that stung the heart. It was the look of someone who had watched friends fall, who had kept communications for missions of life and death, who had cried in the night when the final signal cut out during an attack. He knew not everyone could understand that, and he did not expect the young man at the gate to understand. Yet deep in his chest, a quiet void opened, not because he'd been refused, but because he realized that perhaps all he had ever done now existed only as a silent scar in his own memory. For Howard, glory had never been the goal. He had lived. He had fought, not for recognition, but to do what was right in the darkest moments. But sometimes, silence leaves a man unmoored. No matter how resilient, the heart still needs a small anchor, just so one knows he is not forgotten. Howard felt no anger. He saw no need for blame. Such things had never been his nature. Perhaps he was simply too used to silence. Silence of war, of years serving in shadow, and of old age. But there was sadness, a sorrow that did not flare like fire, but seeped in quietly like a persistent Pacific drizzle, where he had once stood for hours, coordinating life and death flight paths. Seated on a bench, Howard gazed at the gleaming modern building before him, where a glamorous event was underway, and where the sacrifices of his silent generation now seemed unwelcome. And yet, as his eyes slowly lifted to the clear blue sky, a hue understood only by those who had flown, a strange sensation arose within him. A heartbeat, small and steady, resonated in his mind as if reminding him that something was coming. Not exactly a premonition, but an invisible kinship between a heart that had survived life's razor edge and the world's shifting currents. Sometimes, those who have lived years in silence can hear what others cannot. Not far away, inside a small operations room at a coastal naval base, a silver-haired man sat before a surveillance monitor. A retired air transport colonel, now advising aviation special forces, he saw the security camera footage replaying the scene at the cultural center. He glanced once, then paused the screen. Though Howard's hair was white, his back bent, and his gait altered, he recognized the man, not by appearance, but by posture. Howard Lyman, that name had never faded for him. It belonged to the man who had pulled him from the abyss, more precisely, who had rescued an 8-man air crew from a bloody ambush in the spring of 1975. It was a nameless mission, never publicly acknowledged, without medals or citations, just survival. Howard had defied the withdrawal order, risking everything to maintain communications until the last second, enabling the team to escape the hotspot before being encircled. Without him, the colonel, then only a lieutenant piloting that flight, would not have lived to see another peaceful day. The old pilot sprang to his feet. No hesitation. No council convened. Only a single phone call. Decisive, urgent, without fanfare. That call was not ceremonial. It carried a debt of spirit he had borne for nearly half a century. A debt impossible to repay with words of thanks. Orders were issued, not for an exercise, but for a homecoming. A squadron was mobilized, not for show, but because a proper presence was needed. The entire apparatus moved in silence. No press conference, no bulletin, just old soldiers, former comrades, choosing the one way they knew to speak what had never been spoken. And at the small park in front of the cultural center, Howard still sat, silent. He did not know what was happening, nor could he imagine he would soon stand at the center of something far greater than anything he had ever considered in ordinary life. But that morning's sunshine seemed suddenly warmer, lighter, the sky higher than ever. Such tiny signs. Only those who once looked up to the heavens for hope could perceive them. Something shifted within him, not sorrow nor hope, but a sense that what was right was quietly returning to its place, as if, though no one spoke his name, that name still lived in the hearts of those who had served alongside him. And though oblivion may be real, it can be torn asunder by the silent return of gratitude. In that moment, amid a world driven by technology and gleaming name tags, an old soldier sat still, hand on his cane, eyes on the sky, unaware that the wheel of fate was turning in ways he could never have imagined. No longer war, no longer enemies, only truth, indelible, unerasable. And that truth, now flying overhead, was preparing to descend. The whir of helicopter blades thundered through the early morning calm. It was not mere noise, but an ancient drumbeat, deep, steady, resonating as if awakening a region numbed by the clamor of modern life. That sound did not announce a performance, nor a parade. It was a silent, decisive declaration. Something was happening, and it was no accident. From the west, 2 MH-60 Seahawk helicopters descended, gliding over the cultural center's roof, rattling flags and exhibition posters with sudden force. People looked up by reflex, shielding their eyes from the sun, their wide-eyed astonishment laid bare. There had been no warning, no mention of helicopters in the program. No one understood why a Navy squadron would appear over a small town in the midst of an otherwise tranquil annual technology expo. The videographer hastily pulled out his phone. Children dashed to the edge of the plaza. Adults spilled out of the auditorium, as though drawn by an irresistible force. The scene unfolded like a film, but one without soundtrack or editing. Only the wind screaming through rotor blades, hurried footsteps, and a suffocating silence between each restrained breath. The helicopter door swung open. From within the aircraft stepped a man in uniform, his gait resolute, proud without arrogance. In his hands was a small black metal box, square, gleaming, held tightly as though containing something irreplaceable. No guides led him. There was no ceremony. He walked in a single-file fashion toward the stone bench where Howard Lyman sat, as if the rest of the world had vanished, leaving only these 2 men within the blurring scene. The crowd unconsciously parted, as though compelled by a silent solemnity. Murmurs gradually fell silent. A young woman whispered to her friend, "What is happening?" But no one answered. Everything seemed to slow down. Each step of the pilot rang clearly on the stone-paved plaza, like echoes of history returning. Howard rose to his feet, not from courtesy, but as though his body sensed something arriving. His wooden cane was set aside. Though age had made his spine ache each morning, his back remained straight. He watched the man approaching without confusion. In his gaze was a profound stillness, reminiscent of a sea calmed after a lifelong storm. Their eyes met. No words were spoken in that moment, yet something transferred between them. Not a greeting, nor admiration, but recognition, that both had once stood on the same side of something vast, harrowing, and nameless. The pilot paused one step away from Howard, came to attention, and then saluted. The gesture was crisp, determined, weighted with the burden of a repressed past. Then he lowered his hand and slowly opened the box. Inside, the light glinted off a Medal of Honor. Not the type bestowed for rank or fame, but the kind awarded to those who dared to act when others withdrew. Beside the medal lay a thin packet of documents, paper yellowed, corners creased, yet each word was as sharp as a blade cutting into memory. It was a copy of the classified mission order, declassified after nearly half a century. A part of history once locked away, now unveiled. Not for politics, not for publicity, but for justice. The pilot lifted the box to chest height, as though offering a wordless rite. His voice was low, steady, scarcely above a murmur, meant only for Howard's ears. "Sir Lyman, it is time for us to say thank you." It was not a declaration of praise. It was atonement, a gratitude long overdue, voiced by a generation saved yet never able to express thanks. Howard looked at the medal, then at the yellowed order. His eyes did not fill with tears, but the light within them trembled, as though each suppressed memory surged back. The disrupted radio frequencies, the fields ablaze, the pleas echoing through the comms, and the absolute silence he chose as he stayed at the relay station rather than retreat. That decision had saved hundreds of lives, but had condemned him to a lifetime of anonymity, for the mission could not be spoken of. All eyes turned to him, yet he did not turn his back on the crowd. He simply extended his hand, slowly, resolutely, to receive the box, as if reclaiming a piece of his soul long left behind in war. In that moment, no one spoke, but all understood. Some heroes need not stand on high podiums, need not have fireworks or loudspeakers. They only need to be called by their true name, at the proper time, with all the respect they deserve. The exhibition inside the cultural center abruptly came to a halt, as if every light and every cutting-edge technology suddenly felt out of place before the emotions surging outside. The crowd streamed out, their initial chaotic footsteps slowing as they realized they were not merely spectators, but witnesses to something truly rare and sacred. On the lawn before the center, organizers hurriedly rearranged everything. A makeshift stage was formed from a row of plastic chairs, backs scuffed by time and dust. No stage lights, no blaring speakers. Yet no one felt anything was missing. Instead, there was a strange solemnity, as if everyone silently agreed that this moment needed to be preserved in its simplicity. Howard Lyman stood there, not prominent, not glamorous, only an old man in a worn coat, his wooden cane resting at his side, hands clasped before his belly. The breeze tugged at his collar, yet he did not straighten it. That simplicity seemed part of how he lived. No noise, no demands, no need for recognition. When invited to speak, Howard stepped onto the low wooden platform. No nameplate, no MC introduction, only a small microphone standing on its post. He looked down at the gathering below, tens, perhaps hundreds of people standing, sitting, or simply remaining silent. Children, the elderly, technicians, young officers in uniform, all awaited something from him. Not a tale of glory, but a piece of truth long buried. Howard did not speak at length. His voice was not loud, but it was deep and clear, as though honed by thousands of radio transmissions under stormy skies. He spoke of 1975, when he and a small group were tasked with holding a communication station as the enemy closed in. They had no high rank, no backup plan. All they possessed was courage and faith that, if the signal were cut, the entire front line would descend into chaos. He did not emphasize his own role. Instead, Howard quietly mentioned the names of comrades who never returned, the wounded technician who kept his hand on the transmitter, the young soldier on his first combat tour who chose to stay, the mid-level officer who calmly relayed each call despite knowing survival was unlikely. Each name he uttered was a slow exhalation, a memory reopened after decades locked away. Each account carried respect unadorned, because he understood that sacrifice need not be celebrated in an epic poem, but remembered in the quiet hearts of those who listen. The crowd was completely silent. No applause interrupted, no one covertly recording with a phone. In that moment, everyone seemed to step outside their own time to touch a piece of history unwritten on paper. At the edge of the crowd, the young man who had barred Howard's entrance that morning now stood still, hands clenched before his belly. His face was flushed, not from the sun, but from a deep shame seeping into every heartbeat. He had witnessed something greater, deeper, far beyond entry badges or strict regulations, and that knowledge weighed on him as though carrying a wrong he could not yet atone for. After the ceremony ended, people gradually dispersed, but the young man remained rooted in place. Howard descended from the platform, moving slowly but steadily, each step seeming to lower another fragment of memory that had just been unearthed. As he passed the young man, their eyes met, a fleeting touch strong enough to halt a footfall. The young man bowed his head, lips quivering, voice barely audible. An apology neither polished nor rehearsed, but so sincere that the surrounding air grew hushed. Howard did not respond immediately. He only regarded the young man for a long moment, then gently placed a hand on his shoulder. A simple gesture, unforced, yet powerful enough to bring tears to the boy's eyes. His voice was low, deliberate, but filled with the honesty of one who had known human failure all too well. "I am not angry, but I hope next time you will ask a name before judging who someone is. No blame, no condemnation, only a lesson, not found in books, but carved into the listener's heart." The young man nodded, unable to speak further, as though memorizing that truth with a late awakening that was not yet too late. That morning ended without fireworks, without loud cheers, without a single national anthem sung. Yet in the minds of those who witnessed it, one thing was etched forever, that in an age enamored with bright lights and loud voices, there are still men who choose to stand at the margins, quietly holding a wooden cane, quietly remembering names of those who have fallen, and speaking only when it truly matters. Howard needed no medals. He needed no flowery descriptions. He needed, and had received, only one thing: recognition. And today it was given back to him, not with glory, but with respect. That afternoon, sunlight spread a gentle gold over the cultural center's roof, where only hours before, a Navy helicopter had landed unannounced. The air still hummed with the aftershock of that surprise. In that moment, a decision was made to inaugurate immediately a special exhibition corner, no longer on the schedule, not in any original plan, but the most fitting thing the town could do. They named that exhibition corner simply yet meaningfully: Silent Heroes. A wooden placard was hastily set on a metal easel. No one thought it bare or lacking. Quite the opposite. Its simplicity caused people to pause longer, look closer, and remain even quieter. No spotlights shone. No sound effects played. Only a grainy photograph printed from old film, capturing a young sailor beside a field communication station. In the photo, slanted light fell on half his face, one side resolute, the other steadfast. Beneath that image was a short caption. Howard Lyman, Communications Officer, Mission 1975, kept the signal alive for thousands. Beside the photo, a model helicopter, like the one that had arrived at dawn, stood meticulously crafted from wood and raw metal. It was not just a scale model, but a symbol, recalling those nameless takeoffs, those unpublicized flights, and the return of those never spoken of. Students from the town's schools began to gather. At first, only a few, led by teachers during history class. But soon, the children whispered among themselves, and then entire groups and classes arrived. They did not come to gawk at technology, already on display in the main hall, but were drawn by something here, something quiet, yet powerful, something they could not yet name, but they felt it, truth, sacrifice, and a beautiful sorrow. They stood there for hours. Some read the caption repeatedly. Some asked teachers, "Is he still alive?" Some simply stared at the eyes in the photograph, eyes neither smiling nor sorrowful, but infinitely deep as if they had seen too much. Perhaps that is why the children were quieter than usual. Not boisterous, not playful. They remained still, then quietly drifted away, as if they had attended a lesson without books or blackboards, yet left with something very real in their hearts. The adults paused, too. They were mothers en route to the market, office workers off the clock, men who once donned uniforms, now hung up and rarely revisited. They came, not in groups, not by invitation, but compelled by something inside. Some stood for a long while. Some paused only a few minutes before wiping tears away. Some whispered, "At last, there is a place to remember him." Others nodded and said, "We owe men like him an apology, and a thank you." The story of that morning's events swiftly spread throughout the town. The cafe buzzed with chatter. On local social media, images of a helicopter landing circulated everywhere. Many called it a moment of awakening, a slap reminding everyone that sometimes, amid the modern rush, we forget those who once carried our future on their shoulders. Others put it more simply, at last, justice has arrived. Whether in flowery words or in brevity, the message remained unchanged. That which seemed far too late now came just in time. As for Howard, he did not enter that exhibition space more than once. He came only once in the late afternoon, after the crowd had dispersed. Walking slowly, unannounced, unaccompanied, he arrived and merely stood some distance away, never stepping too close to his own portrait. He gazed at the helicopter model, at the small text beneath the photo, then at the neatly arranged school chairs still in rows. Tiny footprints dotted the grass like a message from the younger generation. We were here, and we saw. He did not cry, nor did he smile. Only his eyes changed, shifting from depth to calm, as though something he had long feared was now quietly present, that he was no longer forgotten. No longer a faint name in a secret report, no longer a figure passing through festivities unacknowledged. He was part of memory, and that memory had been returned to the right place, at the right time, and with the value it deserved. When he departed that exhibition corner, he said nothing. But each step he took was lighter, more grounded, as if he had set down a burden without needing anyone's help. His hands stayed clasped before his belly as habit, yet this time his fingers gently touched the edge of his coat where his old unit badge was pinned quietly. And in the fading afternoon light, his figure receded behind the red brick colonnade. But the hearts of those who remained, especially the children who had just left, would forever hold that image. Not of Howard Lyman, the old man, but of what he represented. A man who had served without seeking renown, who had remained silent not because he was forgotten, and who, at last, was recalled not through words, but through gratitude. As night fell and a gentle breeze swept across the cultural center's roof, Howard still sat on the old stone bench, where that morning he had been denied entry. But now, beside him, stood a small bronze plaque, gleaming in the soft yellow light, dedicated to retired officer Howard Lyman, who upheld his dignity in silence. No ceremony required, no list of honors needed, just those words, enough to close the chapter on a lifetime of service unrecognized by name. He never sought fame, nor did he ever hope for accolades. The only thing he had preserved throughout his life was the belief that, if anyone remembered him, it should be for the rightness of his actions, not for words he had spoken, but for the way he had lived. And tonight, when a young boy's eyes paused on that plaque, when the heart of a passer-by quietly stilled, he knew it had become true. There are heroes who need no fireworks. They need not appear on television, nor require a stage for recognition. They only need a single gaze to acknowledge them, a story told correctly, and a moment of another's time. If this story touches you, if it makes you pause and reflect, please share it. Because people like Howard deserve to be remembered, not with noise, but with heartfelt gratitude. Hit subscribe to Veteran Best Stories, where ordinary individuals carrying the highest of ideals continue to be honored, story by story, detail by detail, with all the respect they deserve.